global capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation, and technology transfer, including Indigenous knowledge. And again, I'm having to adapt as I go along, and because it's so late in Addis Ababa, which you will know is the capital of Ethiopia, I now would like to call on Solomon Benor before we keep him from his sleep. Solomon, do you hear me? Hello, Solomon.
Declan.
Yeah.
He's not connected.
Good. Okay. Well, while we're waiting to discover him, I now will go to Paul Oldham. Paul.
Hi there.
Hi, Paul. Very welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'll just launch right in then. So my name is Paul Oldham with One World Analytics and the Manchester Institute of Innovation Research. I lead a small data science team that's divided between the UK and Kenya. And what we do is we provide support for development projects through the analysis of open biodiversity data. And principally, we work with the Access and Benefit Sharing Initiative, which is a multi-donor initiative coordinated by the German Technical Cooperation, GIZ, which has a range of partnerships with African countries. And notably, we're working on the Bioinnovation Africa project, which involves South Africa, Namibia, Madagascar, and Cameroon. The foundation for the work we do is actually taxonomic data from GBIF. So in the case of South Africa, we have 33 million species occurrence records to work with, which is kind of one of the richest sets in the world. South Africa, the government has identified a number of priority species for potential economic development, and those species are the kind of focus of what are called sector development plans. One of the species we're looking at the moment is the genus Cyclopia, which is the source of a kind of bush tea known as honeybush. Many of you may be familiar with, say, redbush or rooibos from South Africa. You tend to find honeybush appearing as a kind of ingredient in redbush teas, although it might not actually be mentioned on the packaging. So what we're doing for a range of species, such as honeybush, for baobab, marula, is applying machine learning based approaches to the analysis of scientific publications and patent text to obtain useful information. What we have here is an example of a patent text where what we're doing is we're labeling up the text with different categories, such as taxonomic names, common names, eunomial names. We also include habitats, viruses, locations, country names, and so on. We actually have a model that is a master model that is trained on about 800,000 of these texts, and then we adapt the model for the country we're partnering with. Once we have our model, we let it loose on the scientific literature that relates to honeybush, and this allows us to produce a scientific landscape analysis where we can see what the different species are or common names are that are involved in publications involving honeybush. We can see what the trends are. We can see the fields of study, and I'll come back to this a little bit later. But if we look, for example, at the fields of study, we can notice the prominence of traditional medicine, going back to the importance of traditional knowledge that's been mentioned by a number of other speakers today. Importantly, we can see the affiliations. We could also see the authors. And for the development technical assistance teams, this information is important because it gives you people and institutions to go and talk to about their research and how they might contribute to partnerships. I'll also mention that we use the Lens open access database from the non-profit Gambia in Australia, which provides open access to over 200 million scientific publications and probably 20 million or so patent publications. If you've not heard of that source before, we recommend it. We can do the same thing with patent data using our machine learning model. Here we have a patent landscape for honeybush, and we can see who the companies are or universities are who are applying, making applications that involve honeybush. We can see their global activity, which markets around the world they're applying to. And I have to say that I was pretty surprised by the size of this, the kind of scale of activity for honeybush. I wasn't expecting much, but we got quite a lot. We can also see the technology areas involved, such as pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, foods. And if we just take a look at the titles briefly, we can see we've got things like aerosol delivery device, then we've got bush tea product, we've got a fragrance composition, there's some kind of stabilized food. So we can see that honeybush is somehow involved in a range of different potential products. And one of us from cosmetics or fragrances, for example, and what really took us by surprise is the presence of tobacco companies in this landscape. And it turned out that what these companies are interested in is including honeybush as a sweetener, a non-sugar-based sweetener in nicotine vaping products. Now, I don't really know what to think about this, but what's interesting about it for our purposes, I think, is that we shouldn't try and second guess the uses that people might make of a species. We need to do this kind of analysis to discover what might be going on. So to draw towards a conclusion, our most recent work has involved kind of scaling all of this up. It's been going on for some time. We've done that by text mining over 160 million scientific publications from Microsoft Academic Graph. So far, we've identified 11.1 million publications that involve species. That's roughly as of this morning. And I think what's the message here is that what we're really aiming for is to make the invisible contributions of biodiversity to human welfare actually visible so that people can appreciate it. I think also, as others have also mentioned, combining biodiversity data with open biodiversity data with artificial intelligence or machine learning based approaches is increasingly becoming possible, and it's possible to inform policy and economic development planning through that approach. And finally, I think, as others have mentioned, and I think we'll hear more about this, it's, in my view, as an anthropologist who worked in the Amazon for many years, it's really important to improve recognition of the contribution and rights of Indigenous peoples, for example, through initiatives such as biocultural labels with scientific publications and metadata. And I'm just going to kind of finish on a note of why I think this is important from my experience in the Amazon in Venezuela, which I hope will reinforce what others are saying, which is the reality that is confronting many indigenous peoples in the Amazon and elsewhere is pretty harsh. So in the area of Amazon estate in Venezuela, where I worked for many years, those areas have now been invaded by gold miners and also by drug traffickers, and two indigenous leaders, environmental defenders from communities where I lived and worked, have been murdered in recent years by persons unknown. The most recent murder was of Virgilio Trujillo Arana, who was shot dead by persons unknown in June of this year. So I think I mentioned this because we need to remember that the recognition of the importance of traditional knowledge and also of indigenous peoples must be balanced by recognition that these people are very much at the forefront of the defense of biodiversity. So thank you very much indeed for your attention.
Wonderful. That's insightful. Thank you, Paul. Sorry to hear about the colleague. And I suppose it's a sign. I know. Yeah. So thank you indeed. And now we will go to Solomon Benor at the Ministry of Education and Science in Ethiopia, and it's way past his bedtime. But we are eternally grateful for the presence of the colleagues here, and particularly for his willingness to stay the time. So Solomon, do you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I'm hearing you, Declan. Thank you so much for your excellent moderation and coordination of Science Summit at the UN. I very much appreciate your efforts going on so far on this Science Summit. I also would like to thank LifeWatch, Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which came up with a very good topic in biodiversity, which is a very important and much preferable asset for human beings to live in Earth in harmony. As you all know, most of the SDGs are directly or indirectly connected to biodiversity. And biodiversity is not only a source of food, shelter, and raw materials, but it is also a source of vaccines and various medicines that human beings are dependent on in this planet. So it's a very important topic that is came up to this Science Summit. What I would like to say a little is that when we talk about biodiversity, there is, I think, a very unique and direct message to the country where I am, Ethiopia, and to Africa. As you all know, the Africa continent in general and Ethiopia in particular is blessed with diverse flora and fauna. And particularly Ethiopia is a country where there is varied topography from -110 below level to plus 5,000 above level. These variations have helped to the country to come up with several endemic fauna and flora, where it is a source of course, the chimpools that I've tried to mention which are used for food, shelter, raw products, vaccines, and medicines. So because of climate change, a serious concern that affects our daily life in this planet, the status of biodiversity in Africa in general and in Ethiopia in particular is highly threatened. Ethiopia, as discovered by Vavilov, a very well-known scientist, Russian scientist, discovered in ancient 17th or 16th century, is blessed with diverse fauna and flora, microorganisms, plants, and animals. However, the diversity and availability of such flora and fauna are highly threatened nowadays. And hence, when I wanted to associate with this, with SDGs, partnership or Goal 17 really remains a very important topic, because the fauna and flora that's available in Ethiopia is not a benefit or beneficial to Ethiopia, but it's a source or a gem pool for the globe as a whole. So long as we are talking about science, there is a need to coordinate and work together. We in Africa, I know, we lack in technologies, but in the Western countries, particularly in Europe and America, there is high tech where we could mutually benefit in utilizing such biodiversities, and of course, in line with the Cartagena Protocol, and hence use these biological resources for various purposes of addressing the SDGs. The scientist talking before my speech really addressed it very well, that indigenous knowledge plays a critical role in maintaining, utilizing, and conserving biodiversity, or floras and faunas. Here in Africa, in general, and particularly in Ethiopia, we have indigenous people, and there is a rich, ample indigenous knowledge on how to use or utilize biological resources. If we are able to align with this, the modern technologies that are available with European and the US, or in the Western countries, there is a way that we can work together, and there is a way also we can mutually benefit together. And hence the biodiversity resources that are available in Ethiopia and in Africa are much more abundant than elsewhere, except in the Latin America and Asia. And if we are able to coordinate and utilize, and particularly use Partnership 17, which is SDG 17, there is a lot that we can talk, discuss, research, and benefit from such resources. So I very much appreciate Mr. Declan for choosing this topic and for coordinating the Science Summit at the UN General Assembly 77. I very much am happy with your ongoing effort, and I'm happy to see you all next week in New York. Thank you. Back to you, Declan.
Thank you, Dr. Benor. Thank you indeed. And as you say, we look forward to maintaining and continuing this dialogue. And congratulations on your work. And indeed, it is challenging, evolving and developing collaborations and partnerships from Ethiopia, but you have achieved considerable success. I hope that in future we can have a lot more of those collaborations. And of course, you host many international institutions.
In fact, in microbial biodiversity.
Yeah.
Microbial biodiversity. There is a team from NASA, European Union,
yeah,
working there, and we're in collaboration with them for extremophila individuals. Yeah. And this is one key opportunity because it's also related to biodiversity, jointly with the IKRI for Ireland, from Ireland as well.
Yes.
Very interesting.
And since we are a little bit ahead of the program, just by way of comment, I mean, it's interesting to reflect on the fact that you see we all know about Francophone Africa, yeah, and there's the Portuguese connection, yeah, and the German connections you see, and that all gives them a very strong basis for collaboration. But of course, Ethiopia is never invaded, never conquered. So it doesn't have hasn't had that tradition of intimate links with the conquerors, you see. Mm-hmm. So it very much has had to paddle its own canoe. And I think it's worth reflecting on that. So it brings a very independent voice in Africa. And again, I do feel, Solomon, that there's an enormous scope, particularly again, the reason we're here is to foster cooperation and collaborations. And I think what Ethiopia has under your leadership and your minister's leadership, I think it is of enormous value at a regional, continental, and indeed global level. And again, congratulations for you. And I mean that because when our partners from Ondo State and from Ethiopia, please bear in mind that when these colleagues travel, it's an enormous challenge to, first of all, to obtain a visa, second of all, to obtain the funds, and then the time. Yeah. And there's quite a number of colleagues who are coming over the next 2 weeks, but I think we don't underestimate. For us, it's easy. We don't have to give it a second thought, but for them to be here, which is why this dialogue last year on Zoom, a lot of people say, "Oh, we don't like Zoom," Yeah, no, we like to go to New York and meet people. Yeah, of course, yeah. But top of the list of people who are not going to come here are Black scientists. Black women scientists are probably top of the list. Yeah, followed by Black male scientists. And even if they get a visa, they're not having the money to come here. You've got to appreciate that. So I think we have to look at the practical aspects of this. So sorry for the digression, but I think we need to see, it's people's lives here we're considering, and I think that has to be understood in the round. Solomon, you're so good to stay up late.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Travel, and although you won't coincide with the colleagues here, they will be leaving on Wednesday, and nevertheless, they will be here in spirit, and will be able to join your meetings virtually from Spain, and of course we look forward together to preparing the Summit of the Future for next year. So thanks again, Solomon. That's very, very good.
Thank you.
Now,
thank you.
Thanks indeed, Solomon. Thank you. So stay very well. And now really to turn to a wonderful another wonderful partner who's been a long-standing ally of LifeWatch, Eric, and has been somebody who understands better than most the machinations of the United Nations. And dear friends, you thought the European Commission was difficult but to understand, but now you're going to learn about the United Nations, which is another thing altogether. However, Dr. Milind Pimprikar in Canada, and of course he has many capabilities, and he's a leader on small space systems, and has done a lot to advance the cause for space, particularly in evolving economy. So we're very delighted to have him here today. But in particular, last year, Dr. Pimprikar, with LifeWatch, Eric, and other partners, presented the Indigenous Knowledge Research Infrastructure concept at the Food Systems Summit as part of the United Nations process last year. Now, this has given a lot of food for thought, no pun intended, but we've had a lot of reference to Indigenous knowledge today, and now I think it's a good opportunity to focus on that. And Milind is going to share with us both the model. And for this presentation, colleagues, I'd like to anticipate a couple of minutes discussion following, because it's very germane, and we have had some wonderful presentations, but equally we need to foster the exchange of views. So having said that, Milind, I'm delighted you're here. As I've said, thank you for making the time, and I hand over to you. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much, Declan. This is a wonderful opportunity, and actually very timely, I would say, Declan, because just 2 weeks ago I was in Botswana for the Climate Adaptation and the Resilience Frontier Summit. Met there the Minister of Environment and the Natural Resources, Honorable Kirrane, and was very, very enthusiastic. So I'll share some thoughts and some ideas, especially coming to the IKRI. So let me see if I could share the screen with you, Declan. And I hope you can see the screen. You can see the screen, Declan, clear?
Yes, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So thanks to you and One Big Well, actually this concept, as you mentioned, Declan, we started discussion at this UN Food System Summit, Indigenous Knowledge Research Infrastructure. We heard from so many colleagues. Paul Oldham, listed several issues and identified some of the challenges. Heard from Edin at the IPBES, the report that came out in July, and several issues from Indigenous knowledge. And of course, from Jose Manuel Avila. So there is a lot of discussion about the Indigenous knowledge, but the challenge is how do we ensure it's preserved, this knowledge? And so with thanks to Declan again, with this research infrastructure framework model from the European Union, we created this IKRI, Indigenous Knowledge, as a very important tool. And I would like to share this for this global capacity building, technical, scientific cooperation. So what is IKRI is basically, it's a global collaborative and multidisciplinary integrative infrastructure to capture, process, analyze, and present the Indigenous knowledge to the stakeholders who are really looking for this from the multiple sources. And this is something we started as a part of the food system, but we recently had this very interesting discussion and presentation at the UN GPDRR, Global Disaster Platform Reduction. It was identified as one of the most innovative tools at the GPDRR. We also had a series of presentations at the UN Ocean Summit. And as I mentioned last 2 weeks ago at the UN Climate Summit, Resilience Frontier, this was kind of highlighted as a key tool that with all the different UN agencies, UNESCO, UNDP would like to work together. So the evolution, as Declan was mentioning, it was at the part of the UN Food System Summit, but the first meeting happened in September 2019 at the UN Climate Action Summit. So the president of the forum, Indigenous Permanent Forum, at that point, and we had series of meetings during that day. Dr. Mirna Cunningham, she was also the chair of the FILAC, which is the fund for the indigenous communities of Latin American and Caribbean. And so we discussed how do we create some structured mechanism for integrating indigenous knowledge with the space, science, data, and artificial intelligence. So these were the three key issues, especially how do we integrate using remote sensing, space data, and AI, and how do we bring this as an integrated tool to the stakeholders. So that was the initial discussion, and then we had series of meetings and platforms at the UN between 2020 and 21. And finally, thanks to Declan, we came up with this wonderful idea of creating this research infrastructure that was unveiled at the UN Food System Pre-Summit that was on July 26, and then finally at the September 23rd summit at the UN Food Systems in New York. So it was launched as a partnership with FILAC, UNOSA, FAO, IFAD, UNESCO, and of course, LifeWatch, ERICH, and AEREP, which is the Africa Europe research platform. They were one of the key partners in creating this concept and taking this forward to the next level. So the challenges we heard from everyone here in this discussion, and it's well known, basically, it came out also in the last report that Aiden was mentioning on the UN IPBS. How do we bring scientists and indigenous knowledge together to learn from each other? But the big challenge is how do we ensure that we store and we capture this information before it disappears? Most of you know the UNESCO has 2022 to 2032 as the 10 years of indigenous languages. There are some close to 1,600 languages are being captured as we speak. So 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with UNESCO and trying to see how that can be part of the IKRI now, how that effort the UNESCO is trying to do for the next 10 years could be brought into a structured format with the IKRI. So how do we capture basically, I mean, AI is a very critical role, the IP issue that Paul mentioned, Paul Oldham. But we need some structured mechanism. So what we did is that we had some professors and PhD students at College London, here in Saskatchewan, in a number of universities. And we're looking at the number of ways of bringing this research community on board, and especially the young communities. So we had several hackathons last year in 2020-21, looking at space technology solution, especially the young communities who are migrating from the indigenous reserves and going for economic opportunities and so on. So this challenge is becoming also more clear that everyone mentioned with the local knowledge system, especially with the biodiversity. When it looks at the global factor and trends, which are something influenced and in the context are missing in many aspects. And I heard from Paul this sad story, but this is part of this 30-30 plan that we heard, which is to conserve 30% of the earth by 2030, and will be discussed at the UNCBD in Montreal in December 2022. So the reason I said this is timely because there will be a focused discussion on IKRI in Montreal. We are proposing a side event with all the UN agencies coming together, UNDP, UNESCO, and so on. And we're also proposing to create some kind of a showcase booth, a part of one of the booth, IKRI, to showcase. So this is a very timely discussion today, to take this to these opportunities moving forward. So the opportunities are very immense, as you know. This is again, I take this from the July 8 paper released by the UN IPBES, that indigenous stewardship of biodiversity is often embedded into this local knowledge and practices, which is the global goals and the twin goals, conserving the biodiversity and securing the indigenous knowledge and right. So how do we take this opportunity further, especially looking at the objective of this session today? So we see there are several global initiatives going on in different parts of the world. There are some in universities in US, in Europe, looking at space data, AI for the conservation projects and initiatives. Last month, President Biden unveiled the part of the his the budget that was or part of this reducing the initial inflation. So they allocated $272 million for creating specifically for the climate resilience and adaptation using indigenous knowledge. So this is a very something positive, and I feel that perhaps the opportunity to build on this or leverage some of these initiatives to take IKRI forward. So the objective of this research infrastructure, again, thanks to Declan and Van Miguel, is to preserve the indigenous knowledge, get the input for the policymakers, create linkages with other repositories. For example, the FAO is working on some of the repositories, the UNESCO, and so on. The UNDP is very keen. So we're trying to create those linkages with all the different repositories and the collaborations to bring those different partners or different stakeholders into this one umbrella, which is the research infrastructure for indigenous knowledge. And of course, the goal remains the same, which are the first goal is to respect, recognize, and strengthen the indigenous knowledge across the world, disseminate and scale it, and of course, enable the, I heard from Aideen about the CARE principle, which is the very critical for indigenous knowledge and creating the policy and regulatory issue, especially with the CARE principle moving forward. So the key issues are understanding the interest and concern of the stakeholders, introducing it to this global stakeholder communities, and building the support network. So we're looking at the policy issues, the regulatory issues, the IP issues. Paul, again, you have done a lot of work in this aspect, so something would be complementary to work with you. The technical aspects, we're looking at the how to create this infrastructure. As I mentioned, Honorable Philda Kirrane, the Minister for Environment at Botswana, she's very keen on hosting possibly for in Africa, IKRI, or to take the lead to co-host in Africa. So this is something which is very positive. And of course, the financing of the conceptualization. So I just want to conclude before the, what are the partnership opportunities in engaging the global communities. We are like to get some of the brainstorming meetings in different parts of the world. The UNDP and UNESCO is offering their support and their, those agencies framework, this network. We would like to get some of these conceptualization issues, looking at the technical policy and of course how the moving forward the different partners. So There are opportunities for academic institutions, public organizations, indigenous communities, and we would like to make sure, or we are trying to ensure that all the 7 regions of the indigenous communities are involved in this process. So this is a very important part of this discussion. And finally, how this synergy with this plenary session, the objective of this session that articulated by Juan Miguel. So we see the IKRI synergy, especially in terms of looking at the UN biodiversity policies and priorities. It aligns very well with those priorities and the goals of the UN. It also very much synergetic with the global biodiversity research and science capacity, trying to build. And this is something which is, we should take it forward. And the last and the most important is especially how do we leverage and with the synergy of the existing biodiversity infrastructure. So with this one, I'd like to thank Declan and Juan Miguel for this, for your initial encouragement and initiative to help create IKRI and now taking it forward to the next level. Thank you again, Declan.
Thank you so much, Milind. Absolutely fascinating, and really thank you for sharing this this vision. And again, just to repeat, we've heard so much and such strong references to Indigenous knowledge, and we now need to reflect on this. And just before I ask Dr. Gonzalez Aranda and Dr. Enrique Alonso to comment, because I think you had some very important issues this morning, Dr. Enrique. The point I would just like to introduce is then how, and there certainly is no answer to this question at the moment, but I think it's an important one to ask. What does the supporting policy environment for Indigenous knowledge look like? But of course, I think when you give Indigenous knowledge just a little bit of thought, you know, the idea of regulating Indigenous knowledge is a ridiculous idea. So then how do we, what's the word? How do we use it? How do we enable it? How do we preserve it? How do we mix it with other data, not data, knowledge forms? And of course, we have to recognize that the Indigenous knowledge, you know, who owns it? Can it be owned? So I think these are very very important questions, because I think in and again, please if others have other views. I often reflect on the my radio astronomy friends told me that we had the Big Bang 13.9 billion years ago, and then it went quiet for a while, and then just under 4 billion years ago we climbed out of the swamps, certain life forms, and that's 4 billion years ago. And here we are, and I think we're about to trash the planet in 100 years. So there's many challenges, and I think in that, I suppose the cynics would say that Indigenous knowledge is the new fashion. It's not. It's the established knowledge. I think what is the new knowledge is patents, intellectual property, and these are relatively, at least in the Western world, they are. In China, patent knowledge is apparently based on 5,000 years of knowledge. So there's a difference in the patent system, but certainly the local Western patent system is a very recent piece, very new. And again, my point here is our tendency to legislate and regulate contrary to the whole idea of Indigenous knowledge. So I think we need to reflect on this. So anyway, just some points, but I think given the profundity of what you said, and again, I certainly would, and it's tremendous we have the benefit of Dr. Enrique Alonso here with us today to be exposed to this. His vision, as we learned earlier on, is vitally important in helping us understand how these different knowledge systems can work together, if that's possible. Dr. Alonso, please.
May I ask you a question? I was surprised not to hear anything here about something that touches upon what Declan has just said. I mean, regulation is needed mostly for the developing countries, so that whatever they get from traditional knowledge ensures that there's a benefit sharing that accrues to the maintenance and even additional capacitation and even direct benefit sharing, capitalistic benefit sharing, parts of the patents, parts of the rights of the exploitation rights contract in IKRI. I was surprised not to see you even mention, I mean, Article 15 of the CBD and the Nagoya Protocol, and how do you interact those databases? Because as soon as they become public, then they lose on the rights. That might be very complicated. So women's knowledge, unless it's kept secret, and that's the reason why it's very difficult to do it, it's very difficult afterwards to pretend to be able to use it. It is true that traditional knowledge can get a public domain status that ensures that then the investment will necessarily pass through there, so that patent cannot be registered neither in the US nor anywhere else, because it is clear that it comes from that source. But the question is that, my understanding is that the more you give more publicity to traditional knowledge, the less you entitle them to get benefits later because of that publicity. As soon as you get the resource, the gene sequencing that can be done now, even by going to the Amazon, do that in a small machine, sequencing machine, you send it via email directly, so you are not even caught at the airport because you don't carry those resources, because that knowledge already in a pharmaceutical company, and I could tell you thousands of cases. I mean, I drafted Article 8 and the first guidelines, the Bonn guidelines, and the Nagoya Protocol. How do you have a list? You don't have to explain here. A topic to address that issue and how these public databases that publicizes and makes available that knowledge is, so to say, balanced with that contrary need, which is keep it secret and make sure that you control its uses wherever they go, and you still keep the rights to be able to ask in Western court for sharing the benefits when that benefit exists. You might not know, but Mr. Mandela was dedicated to that in the last years of his life. So I went with him just waiting to see exactly, and litigating countries that have taken part of the South African resources, have publicized them. So many companies have already benefited from that, but many of them had to pay them back to South Africa, and that restored when you had the change of government in Africa that allowed the African system to have that database of traditional knowledge that had been illegally, I mean, what they did is illegally do what you are doing now, publicize it. Once you publish it, you lose it. How do you deal with that? Or at least is that part of your policy to check on that? How is that done? Which is the correct balance? Do you trace out countries that in their patent offices don't ask for precisely whether there's some link with some traditional knowledge in some country, or that's not part of IKRI as IKRI's agenda? I'm simply curious about knowing if this part or not of IKRI's agenda, while it's a very complicated problem. You understand my question, or may I simplify it?
No, I think it's, you want me to jump, Declan? Yeah.
So the question would be just that. I mean, does IKRI deal with those issues? It's part of the agenda of IKRI. How does it deal with that problem, or that problem does not exist for IKRI?
No, I think you articulated the problem very well. The problem does exist, and this is something which is one of the key issue, especially while we are IKRI is evolved, I should say. Let me add here, when we started this discussion in 2020 and 19, there was a lot of interest, but there was also a lot of reservation from number of so-called, when we had the discussion at the UN COPUS, the Committee on Peaceful Use of Outer Space. So I introduced this agenda item as part of the number of space agencies, NASA, ESA, Indonesia, and now there is a Peruvian space agency, small, big, large. They have some kind of New Zealand, Australia, some of the space agencies have some, about the indigenous knowledge, but it's really not part of the, and so what's happening now over the last 2 years, since we started this IKRI, and since we introduced this as a formal agenda item of the UN caucus, both the scientific committee and the legal subcommittees. So now it's in front of those member states and the committee to look at the issues that you mentioned, especially the legal issues, the legalities of when we are using whether it's the AI or space geospatial intelligence to capture this, how we ensure that it's not only protected, but also in terms of its ownership and so on. So these are the issues being addressed as we speak when we put into this committee. The same thing I would say that when we had this discussion 2 weeks ago with the UNDP and the UNESCO, so each of the agencies have been working on their different, the UNESCO link program is more comprehensive as compared to some of the other agencies, UNDP. So what we discussed, and I said this is timely because we thought that we should have all these different partners in Montreal in December to explore, especially looking at biodiversity. And this is why I feel that today's meeting is very timely and crucial, because we'd like to see how we can create such kind of synergy with all the bringing these different players and partners in Montreal in December, and look at these issues, especially that you mentioned. And those issues are something which will be evolving and will be, as we move forward, especially how do we capture. And, I mentioned to you, there's a lot of efforts going on now, especially companies like with Microsoft and so on. But there are a lot of AI companies who are now looking at this very, very carefully. There are a number of projects on biodiversity with indigenous knowledge. So I think this is, in my opinion, we are at the very critical stage of making this evolution and bringing this forward.
That's clear enough. Thank you for the answer.
If I may,
Please.
to continue the explanation, because Milind and I will be talking many times in many events organized by Declan. The idea is essential from the point of view that remote sensing is essential, and space. So that the reason that in a few minutes, by following the same reasoning thread, our new colleague, Officer Jaime Lobo, is going to intervene showing how we can foster that cooperation, joining with IKRI and other institutions as well from everywhere. And the good news is, and I am authorized to say that because it happened in July, last July in Seville, we have got some funds from structural funds in Andalusia region to start and support you to organize this event, as well as another type of activities just to establish the essential office, jointly with your institution, jointly with UNOSA, because UNOSA is a key outstanding partner, United Nations Outer Office Space Agency. At the same time, I'm looking to you, because I'm looking to you, GBIF will be engaged, so the idea is to work in a very well-structured mechanism, so all of us are connected, and we can support each other. So how we can be efficient with resources from the European Union, from structural funds in Europe, from the next neighborhood development international cooperation instrument, and so on. By providing only one single shot, we used to say one single shot, many objectives, not just because now, as Enrique said as well, it's very important to coordinate all those activities. Before these great companies, they are free. This is a free world. No, just start to do monopolizing things that people serve.
It is illegal. You should ask for permit to the country when you are taking the picture.
Absolutely. That's why you are
careful.
You are also involved there in the project. That's why you are here today, because you are the real expert on that. And we're very honored that you can start to support us as well. Maite Irazabal, who has recently joined our working group just from the Latin American Caribbean effort to support on that. Babedele as well from Africa. So we are going to do this. We're creating that dream team. Now together we are here, and we try to support all the people from all the world in this initiative in a very nice way, in a very effective way, putting innovation in the center. Yesterday, we attended together, remember,
Yes.
to the mathematicians, Association of Mathematicians of Africa.
Yes.
I was really excited because I didn't know about the great skills now to come in Africa on mathematics, applied mathematics, physics, dynamics, and geographic information systems, satellites as well.
Yes.
And now you know that there are available small satellites, small devices, the hubs, the so-called HAP, as well devices that can support to integrate what is called the macro scale with the mesoscale, with the micro scale, jointly alongside with COPEUS, EUSPA, Galileo, NASA, under the umbrella of the Sustainable Development Goals, initiatives, Space for Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations. Our idea is how can IKRI, coordinated by UNGA, can be the efficient mechanism to do that. And in that way, I'm now passing the floor with permission of Declan to Jaime Lobo to explain how we got that mission.
I have a
Wonderful idea, but we must bring in Bamidele. We must. Bamidele?
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Pimprikar,
Yes,
I don't know.
thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for your valuable contribution. I think looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, I noticed there wasn't any incorporation of indigenous knowledges when these things were being conceived, and that is a minus. Thank God for IKRI and thank God for a platform like LifeWatch, Eric. I think we can begin to change that. Listening to the professor from Ghana and his presentation, I know growing up in rural Nigeria, we didn't have weather systems, but we know when to put our cassava in the sun during rainy season. When with benefit of education now, when we have cumulonimbus clouds and stratus cloud that are very low, we know when not to go out and spread those things because it takes about 3-4 days to dry. And we have never been beaten by the rain because we believe in those indigenous knowledges and it has worked for us. Yeah. So with a platform like this and what Dr. Pimprikar is working on, I think there's a lot to learn from those knowledges that we take into consideration because, you know, the widespread belief before was that Africa has no big contribution to knowledge base, but that is because we don't have written tradition. We just have oral tradition, things that have been passed down. So I hope you put more focus because I see from the graphics that a lot is based on Canadian indigenous knowledge systems. I hope you focus your radar a little bit down south and let's see where we go from there.
We will now, and we have a partner. On those stage. So yes, so this is the purpose of this meeting. Just Milind, no, we'll go to
Sure.
Joe.
Can I go quickly? Yeah. So this is very interesting discussion. I mentioned during my talk, I think, about our new strategic plan for the next 5 years, and I talked about the data. But part of that plan is reaching more people, diverse people as well, because we need a very strong knowledge base. So I looked up to get the text of in our work program next year, which we go through every year and put a work program for next year when we state we want to work with nodes, data publishers, partners, and indigenous peoples groups to complete and implement GBIF recommendations on applying the CARE principles of indigenous data governance. So we are coming to the table too when we would like to work with you on these so that our whole GBIF network, which includes 15, 20 countries in Africa, including Nigeria, Ghana, to help spread this news and be part of the process as well. So this is fantastic. And we have a focal point at the Secretariat who is very keen. So keep us in line. Thank you.
Absolutely. And just to add, Declan, to conclude this part, as I mentioned several times, this Minister Filda Kirrane, she's very, very passionate about creating the African, she's the Minister for Environment for Botswana, and very keen on bringing all the African communities, especially you mentioned from Nigeria, Kenya, and so on. So I would really request, Declan has a very strong relationship with Africa, Europe. So I think we should leverage Declan and see if we can take this forward at the meeting in Montreal in December here at the CBD.
Thank you, Milind. So just a practical detail, the date of the Montreal meeting in December is?
The date for the Montreal meeting is December, 1 second, which starts on December, I believe, 9 to the 21st. Let me get you very quickly. Montreal COPS meeting. It's
Just so we can put it in the planning.
yeah, so I'm just looking at the calendar and it's at the December. It's December, I think 9 to the 16th, I believe. So let me reconfirm that. 9 to the 19th. My apology. So it starts from December 9th to the 19th.
Wonderful. And the title, COPS?
COP 15.
It's the one that was
Yeah,
supposed to have place
in China.
in Convened, and it was transferred.
That's right.
And as I mentioned, Declan, we are proposing there will be a booth, and they're proposing a booth for, I mean, IKRI would be part of one of the booth, and having all this UNESCO, UNDP as one of the complete. So this is where I invite you and Juan Miguel to, we should take the leadership here.
And just for your information, if I could, and if it has any bearing, just be mindful that there's a slight connection here. The US Africa Summit takes place in Washington on 13, 14, and 15 of December. So the timing is very fortuitous, actually, with both. There could be participation in both of those.
It's 5 to 17 in case of that. I mean, the CBD COP is from December 5 to December 17.
5 to 17.
Probably the first week would be the normal technical work. The second week would be the high level.
Fantastic. Excellent.
End of negotiations of the ministers.
Good. So now we attend to Mr. Lobo, Jaime Lobo.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. And just if I could, just an information note is that according to my latest information, His Excellency Hang Chong Naron, the Minister of Education from Cambodia, who has been standing by, will speak at 4, and I believe also a member of his team will be downstairs and will join in person. So please, Jaime Lobo, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Declan. Thank you, Juanmi. I'm going to try to share my screen. Okay. I don't know if you can see it. I will try to put it full screen right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Okay, it's taking some time. Okay. Are you able to see it?
Marvelous.
More or less.
Yes.
No, yes.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So the title of this presentation is Remote Sensing and Space Technology in Support of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Research, Innovation, and Sustainable Management. So I'm going to talk a little bit more on what Dr. González Aranda just mentioned and what Milind was also talking about. So it's clear that the data that we are going to gather using remote sensing and other space technologies is vital and is really important for the understanding of what's going on here on Earth. So my talk is mostly about this data. So what are we doing at LifeWatch IKRI? So we are gathering this data from different sensors, starting from the ground, with sensors on ground. Then we are using also drones. We are involved in different projects that using drones to gather this data. Also, in last August, we attending the launch of a stratospheric balloon with a sensor on board to gather more information for agriculture research. And LifeWatch is also involved in a nanosatellite that is going to be launched next year. So we are taking a really active role on all these programs that are going to develop sensors and launch them, and we are going to gather that data and put it in service of the community. So of course, there are several organizations that are already doing this. They were mentioned before, and for us, I mean, from my point of view of the platform, we have the Global Earth Observation System of Systems, and then we also have the Biodiversity Observation Networks, both the European and the Group on Earth Observation. And this, you know that from the different Secretary Generals of the UN, they are taking this really seriously, and we know that the remote sensing and Earth observation is very valuable for different type of issues, not only biodiversity, but also for different geopolitical scenarios, because when you use a satellite, they don't have the restriction that, for example, an airplane or a drone may have, because they are able to gather data without the permission of the countries that are below them. Okay, here we have all the, I want to mention, as it was mentioned previously by Juanmi also and by Milind, that we want to cooperate very closely with the UN Office for Outer Space, Copernicus, Galileo, and Space for SDGs. So here, when we are talking about space technology, it's not only Earth observation, because Earth observation, you can use it, for example, in the Copernicus system, you can use optical satellites, you can use radar satellites, but it's really important for different applications to use geolocation tagging. And for that, you can use different GNSS systems, either GPS, Galileo, GLONASS, or even Beidou, but it's a Chinese system. Here in this presentation is here just to remind that the UN is taking a really deep interest on the use of space technologies for monitoring and protecting biodiversity and ecosystem. So this is not new. I mean, we have to build on this, and in order to do that, what we want to do with LifeWatch IKRI is to be another actor and to cooperate with all the different organizations and put all our knowledge and our funds in order to be able to provide more data and better data. So the stakeholders at the end are going to be the scientists, the managers of the nature managers, and of course the policymakers, because at the end of the day, they are the ones that need to decide what to do with the data and the knowledge, because it's been said before that data is nothing if you don't obtain some knowledge from it to be served to the policymakers. Now I'm going to show really briefly some examples of the application that you can do with Earth observation and remote sensing. For example, in this paper, that one of the authors is Antonello Provenciale, that is a really good investigator. They are using two indexes. One of them is related to the temperature of the surface of the Earth. The other is related to how much water is available. So in order to measure these two parameters, the LST and NDVI, you have different instruments or sensors on board of spacecraft. For example, one of them is MODIS, that is flying in NASA spacecraft, Aqua and Terra. And for this specific paper, the data to perform this paper was obtained from it. another example, another paper is this one that its objective was to infer ecosystem functioning from the spatial patterns of phreatophytic plants. So in order to do this, what the authors did was to use free available data from Google Earth. So Google Earth used different platforms, is gathering data from different providers, but at the end of the day, it's mostly free. So in order to perform this type of analysis, they have a really good, well, it's pretty good resolution compared to maybe airborne or a UAV, but with a much lower cost. So it was mentioned by Milind that right now what people are doing is to use this data, and in order to extract information from it, they are using artificial intelligence and machine learning. In this case, they were using CNN, convolution neural networks. But I'm not going to get into that. So this is, if you want more information, I mean the slides will be available for this one. Okay, so I just want to mention that in those previous papers, the work of Domingo Alcaraz and also Antonello Provenciale was really important. And we are also really grateful to Murray Hitzman, because he's involved in geodiversity and we are collaborating with him, and he's an excellent researcher. So I just wanted to mention him. And this is my last example. This paper use again free data from Google to detect the presence of whales around the globe, and afterwards they were using again artificial intelligence and machine learning to locate and count the whales. In that way, you save a lot of time and resources. So using this free data and using the artificial intelligence, they were able to detect the whale with an accuracy of 84%. And afterwards, they were able to count the whales with an accuracy of 97%. This can be done for different biodiversity projects, elephants, camels. And now for my last slide, and you've seen this slide a couple of times already, but I think it's important for us. It's really the strategic action is to create a task force with the following stakeholders: IKRI, CANEUS, sorry, I need to go back, CANEUS, UNOSA, PHILAC, and Africa. Sorry, let me see this. IRAP Science. And as it was mentioned before, we are not trying to reinvent the wheel. We just want to cooperate with all these different organizations. We have the data, we have the knowledge, we have the experts, and what we just need to work together to improve that working in a human level. And also, in order to do that, operationally, we want to take advantage of LifeWatch tools like LifeVlog and Tesseract. And with this, I'm finishing my presentation. Thank you very much to everybody, and muchas gracias.
Maybe you have to.
Sorry.
We were muted.
Yeah, sorry, we were muted. But no, thank you very much, Dr. Lobo. Very resourceful. very creative, and I think you really fostered our understanding and appreciation indeed. And thank you for outlining the constellation of the future group and the point I'm suggesting or proposing to the leadership present here today is the future inclusion of the government of Ondo state in Nigeria, led today by Dr. Bamidele. And I think she eloquently presented not an argument, but the very obvious reasons for doing that. So let us reflect that in the outcome of this meeting. So thank you very much indeed. Now, if I could just turn to our wonderful colleagues all the way from Cambodia. We will have one short intervention and then we invite your minister. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you very much. Thanks indeed. So now I believe we have Esther Cachón Campollo. Cachón. It's a video. Yes. Okay. Somebody press go. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I very appreciate your invitation to participate in this session. My name is Esther Cachón. I belong to the Spanish State Research Agency, the AEI, that is the main funding body for research and innovation in Spain. Particularly, I am in charge of the AEI participation in international initiatives regarding health and environment. And now I will share my screen so I can start my presentation. I'm going to talk about the European partnership in biodiversity called Biodiversa Plus. And I will give you a special overview on the internationalization of the partnership. But before that, I would like to give you some data about biodiversity in Spain. I'd like to go to next slide. Next slide. That is, okay. Sorry for that. Spain is the European country that holds the major biodiversity in its territory, even excluding the Canary Islands, and that is because of our different climates and topography within the country. We hold the 60% of the habitats and 40% of the species catalogued in the European directives for the conservation of nature. This richness constitutes an ecological wealth for Spain, but also gives us a great responsibility towards Europe as a whole. For these reasons, biodiversity is one of the priority themes in our state research agency, in our state research plan, and we cover both research and conservation. And actually, it is one of the main priorities of our agency. So the Spanish State Research Agency has been collaborating with Biodiversa Initiative since its beginning in 2005 and has funded projects for more than 8 million euros. And the AEI is also a full member of the new European partnership Biodiversa Plus, and we will continue funding transnational research, development, and innovative projects. The European Commission has adopted since 2008 several strategies to hold the loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services in Europe through different trans-European initiatives. They were called Biodiversa 1, 2, and 3, Net Biome, Biodiv Scene, Biodiv Clean, and Biodiv Restore. And all these are previous experiences of international cooperation in research and innovation within EU. As a result, a strong network of research program managers and funders has been established, and we have this network, we have very clear goals. The three goals are the development of a shared vision of biodiversity research priorities, by elaboration of a common SRIA, Strategic Research and Innovation Agency. We work for the alignment of national programs, and we work for the launch of transnational goals for research. And now some figures about the collaboration during last years. 125 research projects have been funded, comprising 863 research teams, that is 3,097 scientists from, in average, 30 different countries. And these projects were funded through 10 competitive goals, amounting 237 million euros. Following this approach, the European Commission has approved Biodiversity Plus. And Biodiversity Plus is an extended network of programmers and funders on biodiversity systems, nature-based solutions. And we say extended network because now we are 37 European countries and we have up to 74 different partners. Some of them are ministries in charge of research. Some of them are environmental protection agencies. Some are ministries in charge of environment, and others, and the main of these 74 partners are the funding agencies. Here you can see an overview of the activities and budget foreseen for the new European Partnership Biodiversity Plus. And the partnership will be carrying out activities, and the objectives of these activities are to promote and support research programs and projects, to promote and support transnational biodiversity monitoring, to better connect research and innovative programs and projects to policy, to promote and support nature-based solutions and evaluation of biodiversity in private sectors, and the internationalization of European research and innovation. And I will focus my following slides on this, on the internationalization. And some more data here. During Biodiversity's partnership lifetime, the lifetime will be 7 years. 6 goals will be launched, amounting around 42 million euros each year. This would mean a budget of more than 800 million euros over the 7 years, combining in-cash and in-kind contribution from the partners, and including 165 million euros by the European Commission. Among the goals of the internationalization activities of the partnership are the collaboration with the Intergovernmental Platform of Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES, and the alignment with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Well, focusing on the interaction between IPBES and Biodiversity Plus, I should say that Biodiversity Network has been collaborating with IPBES since its creation in 2012 through a mutually beneficial approach. And some of these interactions are quoted here. We had knowledge synthesis and transfer of biodiversity project results to the IPBES assessments. We had a guide on the use of biodiversity scenarios promoting the use of IPBES assessment for decision-making and in public and private sectors. We had training sessions led by Biodiversity Building on its guide on policy relevance of research that is part of an IPBES fellowship program in 2017. Information session on the Nexus assessment to spur engagement by biodiversity-funded project scientists. We have the mobilization of possible topics at interface between biodiversity and climate change. We had a research program implemented in 2017 with the Belmont Forum for over 28 million euros, building on gaps identified in the IPBES assessment on biodiversity scenarios. And more recently, Biodiversity Plus is hosting the IPBES Technical Support Unit on Knowledge since 2019. At the end of the day, the intended impact of Biodiversity Plus international activities is that the research and innovation that we do in Europe efficiently supports the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the IPBES objectives, the Convention on Biological Diversity, CBD, and also other relevant multilateral environmental agreements, they called MEAs, and also supports international organizations like FAO. Now, looking to the future, the possible activities be undertaken by Biodiversity Plus with IPBES and with multilateral environmental agreements with different MEAs are presented in this slide. As you can see, they are aligned with the 4 main IPBES functions, which are also considered of relevance to collaboration with MEIs and the overall Biodiversity Plus portfolio. And these 4 main areas are assessing knowledge, building capacity, catalyzing the new knowledge, and supporting policies. On my last slide here, I just wanted I wanted to show you the 3 kind of beneficiaries of this collaboration that has been identified for each activity along 3 categories. The 3 categories are the researchers who have participated or will be participating in future Biodiversity Plus projects, the decision makers, the national authorities, normally the ministries or the funding agencies involved in this kind of activities, and the stakeholders. And here we have a very diversified kind of stakeholders. We can have the end users or just the people in general, the industry, the experts in consultancy, and other kind of stakeholders, everybody that you can imagine. Thank you very much for your attention. This was my last slide. Bye-bye. I thank you again for inviting me to this session. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Esther. Now we are honored to have present His Excellency Hang Chon-Naron, the Minister of Education, Youth and Sport from Cambodia. We are delighted with his ability and his presence here today. And I believe he's now online. Yeah. Do you want to say a few words?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair, and also distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor and pleasure for me to be invited to attend this meeting on a very important subject, biodiversity, especially the session on the inclusive global capacity building, technical and scientific cooperation and technology transfer, including indigenous knowledge. I would like to take this opportunity to share with the meeting on how Cambodia has get involved, especially in the UN Convention on Biodiversity. Cambodia signed and a member of the convention, and since the mid-1990s, we have established the protected area, which account for almost 70% of the territory of Cambodia. The challenge of protecting biodiversity is the competition between biodiversity and agriculture, and also food production. As well as in Cambodia, we have the Tonle Sap Lake, which provides 70% of fish to the population, and fish account for around 75% of the intake of the protein for the population. However, Tonle Sap Lake is a kind of inland area, which also surrounded by the inland forest, where fish can spawn. It moved from the Mekong River and then it produce during the rainy season in the Tonle Sap Lake. Recently, we have challenges of the population started also to really to grow rice in that inland area, cutting the forest, and so that we can grow rice. Therefore, I think we need to have really a research on how to use the research to inform the population. For that reason, we have started to establish the program at the Royal University of Phnom Penh on the environmental education, as well as to conduct research on the impact of climate change on biodiversity, but also how to encourage local population in order to protect biodiversity. Another reason is people believe that like rubber plantation, for example. They believe that when I think the rubber price goes up, people tend to cut the forest and grow rubber. And people believe rubber is also forest. In fact, when we grow rubber, I think it resulted in the loss of biodiversity because farming, also rubber is although it's like forest, but it resulted in the loss of biodiversity. And I think therefore right now we have started to integrate into the curriculum the education on environmental issue, especially on climate change, since early grade on, primary school, secondary school, and also higher education, promoting the research on the biodiversity and share that research in order to make informed decision, especially with the decentralization of the government function from the central level to the provincial level. We need to really build the capacity and link the use of data to make informed decision of how to protect different species, including fish, including different species in that area. And I think that the knowledge, indigenous knowledge play a very important role. Usually, and I think that there's a gap between, scientific community and the local population. And that the need to really take into account in this indigenous knowledge on how to protect diversity also play an important role. Basically, I think capacity building need to build from early on, from students at different level, and need to have an integration into the curriculum and also in different subject as well, not just the environmental education per se. Integration of in terms of science. Earth science is another subject that is taught at the primary school, where I think the capacity building in terms of raising awareness of the student, of the teachers, and also through that of the population on the need for the protection of biodiversity, so that we can strike a balance between protection and development. I think in many parts of the world, there's a competition between protection of diversity and also development in terms of farming in terms of expanding industrial production of crops, etc. And the involvement of the scientific community, especially at the university level, also very important. And promoting research, I think, is still very early in Cambodia, and link that research and the topic to the needs of the local population, so that they understand how the protection of diversity can ensure sustainable use of resources for the future generation. So I thank you for your kind attention. Overall, I think that capacity building need to take into account indigenous knowledge, but also need to be integrated into the school curriculum at different level, and research should be make it I think should be disseminated widely, so that the local population aware of the benefits and of the challenges of the benefit of the protection of biodiversity, and the challenges of competition between protection and development. So I thank you for your attention.
Perhaps it falls to Christos and then on me to perhaps respond a lot of what we hear. In one sense, it's familiar, so we're all facing the same challenges. I think this is what's fascinating, but of course the context and the localization at least what has to. Christos.
Thank you, Declan. Mr. Minister, thank you for your intervention, the short intervention. It seems that indeed what you say falls within the scope of this event, and it seems that the activities that you reported from your area form part actually of the activities that are going on in other parts of the world, specifically the local knowledge and how this local knowledge can be channeled to mitigate the impacts of the contemporary challenges, such as the climate change and its impacts on specifically on the local populations, but also on the cities and the agricultural crop production. I think that what is very important is to keep this line of communication with you, with your country, and try to keep you informed, keep you posted on the activities and initiatives we are taking on, especially with our colleagues from GBIF. The Director General, John Miller, is with us today, and I'm sure that he heard you with utmost attention. And I think that we will keep this line of communication in the future. Thank you again for being here with us. And yeah. Thank you. Can we first turn to Ronnie and then to
Absolutely.
Joe?
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, first of all, also on behalf of LifeWatch, Eric, Christos here, our CEO, but also the Kingdom of Spain. Thank you for coming to our premises here in the Trade Commerce Office.
Sovereign territory, the Spanish sovereign territory.
Yes, this is the Spanish, is sovereign territory.
I don't think so.
So in fact, I may inform you that our Councillor Permanent of the States for Environmental Issues is here. His name is Dr. Enrique Alonso Garcia. He can also intervene later. But from my personal perspective, I would like to congratulate so much for the tremendous effort that Cambodia has developed to protect, and manage biodiversity for sustainable development in Cambodia. I have been reading a lot of statistics of all the biodiversity, all the richness that you have, and how you are involving in capacity building, improving the livelihoods of the people, the welfare of the people in all their aspects, because most of the red territory is protected right now. And that is amazing. Taking into account that you maybe, I think it's the country for the southeast of Asia with the best practice ever in biodiversity preservation. In order to support you to continue going in that excellent way, we think that, and I will pass the floor later to Joe, Joe and then Enrique, that we humbly, honestly, based on data, intelligence, can support you.
Thank you.
On shoulders, on giants' shoulders. And one of those giants is GBIF, so nothing more to say. And now, Joe, your turn. Thank you.
The word I haven't heard yet is cooperation.
Yeah.
Yes.
You did.
Did I? Sorry, I was sorry.
I'll
get to that right away.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad to raise it again. Then, sorry.
Yeah, thank you for attending this afternoon, and I enjoyed your intervention. So I'm happy to say that Cambodia is a member of the GBIF network, joining 2 years ago, and Dr. Samali Chan of the Ministry of Environment is our head of delegation. So that's fantastic. We have, unfortunately, a small representation in Asia, so we are delighted that Cambodia is part of our network. To alleviate some of that problem, we are having a major outreach event in Bangkok in late November, in which we will invite both the head of delegation, Dr. Chan, and the node manager from Cambodia to the event to participate. And that really is about how the GBIF network works, including LifeWatch. Eric is a member of the GBIF network, and to in capacity building, and Nigeria. So we are, I just wanted to let you know that event, and the outreach and capacity building is something that happens both at the global level, but also at the national level within the node, which is in the Ministry of Environment. I'm happy to talk to you more about that, and thank you.
Thanks indeed. Dr. Enrique?
I was looking for exactly when I was in Cambodia. I'm getting old, actually. No, I was commissioned actually by the UN transitional body after Vietnam left, just to help you with the distribution of energy everywhere. And you might not know that in Spain, mostly after the Spanish Civil War before, we invented something called the butane small little capsule, actually, which allowed every Spaniard house to have enough energy. A small little bottle, and you still see hundreds of millions of bottles distributed all over rural Spain. So I recommended that instead of linking you to the hydropower system in Thailand, after that you didn't like at all. Actually. So that allowed me literally to be there and visit eventually, and I had there two of my, I was working actually for the American government. So don't do that, not the Spanish government, I'm doing it from California. So I think that you've done a wonderful job. Since then, I just went there, and you recall, probably you're too young, you might not even remember actually, what was the rural space in Cambodia, how very few roads were, how many dirt roads if we just simply go into your neighborhood there. But the community services that I saw there, in which actually we were able to convince the communities literally that at least for public buildings, the, so to say, market-oriented type of technology, shops in which you could get this small little gas butane, and then they could sell it for a ridiculous price to their families, or mainly for the schools, etc. So they could have heating and everything. So I went to many places in which very possibly you might still have difficulty in going. But afterwards, I have followed eventually. It's mostly news that arrived to me because I think that's and I'm actually amazed. Actually, I mean, how many days to discover a new huge mammal that nobody knew about? Actually, in Cambodia, we found a new kangaroo, a new wolf, a new whatever. Actually, so it's amazing. So I want to congratulate you, and I was literally encouraged not so much. I just learned that 2 years ago you entered the GBIF actually. And I would literally think of how you can get into that cooperative scheme actually, because and you're very intelligent in a way. So it's full cooperation. And my idea was, we're not going to come there just to have, you know, the statistical development bank, the Asian Development Bank, etc. To say, well, until the time in which you are able to recover your own self-government, you'll do this or that. No, sorry, no, wait. I want to see exactly what they want exactly and try to get your ideas there. So, but I think that your biodiversity conservation policy is perfect. It's wonderful. It looks similar to me as the Bhutanese 7th path to conservation biodiversity in this area. because it is so local in the way in which you have devised the policy, and at the same time, it literally links perfectly to the system that I would certainly be glad to see if I can at least help you with these newborns actually that are now into that. So thank you.
The young fellows, the young boys.
The new young fellows I'm getting old, so eventually I'll disappear. But congratulations, I'm very glad that you came here, and we'll be very glad to this time as with my head for the Spanish government, not for the US.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much.
And one reason we're here today is to sort of anticipate the United Nations Summit of the Future next year and to work on a science agenda for that. So we hope that this meeting here today will engage you with us very closely as we generate that process. So delighted to have you here today. So thank you all. Now we move to our recommendations section, which is the final session for this afternoon. And we're delighted to arrive here. I think we've had so many recommendations there already, but I think it's yes, we have to generate recommendations, and I think we have to advance it. You're missing somebody?
Yeah, too. Muhammad Abdul.
Connection problem, yeah.
Ronnie Phuthego.
Same. Okay. But don't worry, I've got it. You know, so our first speaker is going to be speaker for our first vision of recommendations will come from one together.
Yes, one. We have taken took a lot of notes. In fact, Jose Manuel had done that. But in general terms, the good thing of this this summit, this plenary session, is that we went through how biodiversity is crucial for delivering the United Nations Sustainable Developments and what needs to happen for right now. So paving the way from the point of view of the demands, of the necessities, the societal challenges addressed, derived from the fact that there is serious biodiversity loss due to the impact of the climate change. And we could check how from many parts of the world, many people have expressed their opinion, so that at the end the main conclusion is we need data, fair data to be fungible, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So it seems to be very easy task, but it isn't. Because depending on the metadata, what means those data, the characteristic, the way you access to them, if they are biotic, abiotic, historical, in real time, sensor networks, how we can deal with all the complexity, how we can engage all of them, including a universal cloud. And then depending on the needs of the requirements of the users, can we provide, how we answer the question posed by researchers, decision makers, companies, socioeconomic tissue, and last but not least, citizen scientists. At the end, we have also agreed that capacity building, as a good practice in Cambodia, is essential. Capacity building also focuses in a transgenerational approach, from child to grandparents, and children. Why? Because indigenous knowledge cannot be neglected. Indigenous knowledge is essential to understand our motto, that is speaking globally, acting locally. But you cannot act locally if you don't understand the natural, the peculiarities, socioeconomic peculiarities, and cultural peculiarities. So this paved the way to the section human networks combining indigenous knowledge, nature-based solutions, and ecosystem services, just shared by John Miller. And this is, for instance, the data is that most of the, for instance, green medicines compounds are coming from the rainforest, and they're essential for pharmacology and other purposes. And there is these plants, without being discovered, are disappearing. This is something that is a real problem. For instance, we have identified that in order to avoid this, agroecology is a good practice. For instance, agroecology, agriculture, sustainable agriculture practices. So because sometimes it's better to check what previous generations did and how to support with the state of art of technology, not only ICT ones necessarily. Although data are essential in this new 21st century. So that when we are facing the challenge of addressing global data sets to inform policymaking, we have been very careful depending on the socioeconomic, cultural aspects, so that we went through several aspects addressing to the hydrosphere, atmosphere, and lithosphere ecosystems. So water, air, and land, And we have discovered that this can be addressed as a complex system with a lot of peculiarities. And in that sense, in order to be inclusive, we need, again, we're getting back to the main conclusion, one of the main conclusions, Declan, if I may, that is the inclusiveness of the global capacity building, the technical and scientific cooperation, technology transfer, and inclusion and the indigenous knowledge. Why? Because this is the only way to move forward to a shared solution to the real crisis of the biodiversity loss. And we have checked that at very institutional, regional, national, European, international level in general terms, they are very reliable, outstanding initiatives. Which is the main challenge? Are the main challenge? Heterogeneity of the resources and the scale factors. Scale factors from the point of view of the research itself, micro, meso, macro scale. We need data from remote sensing, from satellites, we need from the drones, we need from the sensors, and we need from microbia. 96, if I'm not mistaken, please Joe, just if I'm wrong, 96% of the overall biodiversity, microbial biodiversity of the planet, and how these interactions have a correspondence with the different initiatives at political level. Because there are so many initiatives, we got a lot of information, and we need to find a commons on how to proceed locally, but thinking globally. I take a benefit of the best state of art of ICT, considering that, again, business knowledge, and for that, again, we need that capacity. Having said that, we have finalized, thank you very much, Declan, with one of the best practice is Cambodia, example. You can go to the web, you can check. And this is an overall approach to the final conclusions that will be further developed in the corresponding document, based on the magnificent, I don't know how many thousands of bullets can you written down, Manuel, how many?
More than 15 pages.
15 pages. You have something that is not covered by me in general terms.
You cover mostly the key points. It's yeah, how the cooperation is essential to promote a knowledge-based solutions, you know, to trying to face this challenge, the key role of indigenous knowledge and the capacity building and training. I think it's the most important point.
In order to complement these conclusions, we can reaffirm them with the permission, the intervention maybe of Fernando and Esther, with the same and the rest of the speakers.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. And I think another key word that we need to use more here is alignment. Yeah. By which I mean policy and political alignment. I think that's usually, without being forensic. I'm not saying, you know, our legislation has to be the same as your legislation or your legislation. However, conceptually, I think there's enormous scope for alignment. I think that is very important. I think the other issue, which is slightly more complex, is what's known as regulatory harmonization. I think this is very, very important. But the problem for me with regulatory harmonization is that it means that less developed nations are harmonizing their regulations with advanced state regulation. You see, and I in one sense that's wonderful. But what it does is it doesn't encourage, or it doesn't perhaps allow sufficiently other nations to evolve their own concept models for regulation.
I think, you know, we have the global framework, you know, under the UN, which provide overarching framework for environmental protection, for biodiversity, and there's a need to, you know, to promote also what we call the environmental law, you know, integrated. So it started with, you know, to train lawyers, but also environmentalists, the lawyer who work on the environment, and that allow for the integration and localization of the big idea, the big framework into the national level, but also to the local level, because, you know, they have national framework, but when it go down to decentralization at the provincial level, we need also to raise the capacity of governor, local governor, district governor, and how to make law work at the national level, but the implementation at the local level. And I think that harmonization and localization is very important.
Absolutely. And this is why the United Nations is advancing Agenda 2030 to advance a localized, community-based approach to global legislation.
For example, you know, when it comes to community forestry, that is very successful because I think the ownership is very important. If people look at, oh, this is state, you know, maybe it's not belong to me, but become community forestry, you know, this is our forest. We need to protect our forest. And I think that makes a big difference. That localization and local ownership of biodiversity, protection of biodiversity, and the idea of community forests, the idea of the involvement of the local people for the protection of biodiversity of the environment is really critical, because, you know, if they don't understand, then, you know, there's no pressure from them to get the, you know, policymaker to make the environmentally friendly decision. And I think that's why there need to be localization and awareness, but also capacity building, not just nationally, but also at the community level, so that people understand that if something happens, they're the one who bear the brunt of the, you know, environmental impact. Not just, you know, usually we do the environmental, you know, impact assessment, you know, for big project. But sometimes when, you know, but how to make sure that really the issue that impact the communities are really protected in big project. It means that there should be a demand side also, not just, you know, the supply side, not the top down, but also the bottom up demand. You know, I think that will be make that process really not just interesting but powerful. Because it linked to electorate, you know, it requires that policymaker, legislator to take into account the interests of the local community in developing any project.
And that idea that you suggested that I discovered there, and that's the reason why he chose ultimately the totally decentralized energy distribution system for all the territory. It has been very efficient. Actually, you're absolutely right. And that includes a very complex legal issue, but that is very easy. It's very practical, actually. I mean, perhaps just take 2 minutes to explain. The U.S. National Forest Service, not far from here, called me once because there was one forest in New Mexico, Vallecitos, a place called Vallecitos. That's a small valley in Spain, in Spanish, that was burned absolutely every year. It burned, and it's a national forest. And they didn't have a clue of what there was until someone found it. So I went there, and it was because the locals there, notwithstanding the wars and the Alamo, etc., still remain the tradition of Spanish community mountain ownership. And they said, sorry, we burn it because they don't allow us to decide what to do with it until they allow us. And it is the only law we passed, after the Americans passed a special law, the Forestry Act. And it's the only national forest which is not state-owned neither by the federal government neither by New Mexico. It's owned by the community of Vallecitos itself as a community entity, which is very complex for decision-making, but very complex for the Westerners that make laws, etc. Explaining that in Germany, it's almost impossible, or even in the Nordic countries. So, but it's very feasible because it's simply. And those practices are absolutely great. And very possibly that's part of the biodiversity policy. I mean, it's ultimately who owns, who's the entitled power. In a democracy, you to say, oh, well, we elected this, so this is entitled to do. No, sorry. Besides human rights, you need to have other legitimacy issues, which are traditional type of power sharing, as soon as they don't implement. I mean, it doesn't imply, you know, having a revolution there, but simply normal traditional practices that have been for millennia. Yeah, that's my idea. So as I said, and you establish that as a generalized system because transferring from a rural world directly into the 21st century world, actually you make a big leap instead of going through all these passes that developed countries say that you should go through until you go there. We do that immediately, like the iPhone. Okay, why build telephone company when local community has had no access to iPhone? Why bring their own phones? You simply get them the iPhone and that's it. Africa's much
Still leapfrogging.
That's it. So that's the idea. So and so it's not it's easy to do. The question is how very clear what is the policy that. So congratulations once more. I think Christos.
Yeah, just to add on this, that this approach that started, from the lawmaking is now forms part, of the environmental management. And I think that one of the approaches that is currently being implemented is the participatory approach. So each time the manager wants to make a plan of implementation for management of the of an area, he or she needs to come into contact with the local people, with all the interested parties, and of course the local population. One of them.